See you too.
Okay, I hope you don't mind. I'm recording right now.
Okay.
So, first of all, this is an interview of our wonderful Venture House member, Michele White, who has been a member for half her life. So, Michele, I'd like you to tell the Zoom interview all about you and how you found out about Venture House and the start your start at Venture House on the second floor of the Y and the moving and all these wonderful things, because this is very a great tribute to you as well as Venture House and the success of the past 30 years.
Okay. I first found out about Venture House in April of 1990 from my therapist. And she said there is a clubhouse named Venture House. And I asked her about it. I said, do they have employment, housing? She said she didn't know. She didn't know much about it. So I was living in supportive living at the time. And they thought that I should do volunteer work rather than go to a clubhouse, because they said that they thought that I was very high functioning and I could work, voluntarily. And then in October of 1990, I met a gentleman called Jose Rivera, who became my
Okay.
boyfriend. And a month later, he said, I have a place I belong to that I would like to take you to. And he said, the name of it is Venture House. And I said, wow, that's what my therapist told me about 5 months ago. So he took me in and he had me meet the then program director, Stephen Dutiel.
Yes.
And Steve Dutiel interviewed me and he said, we have no openings now, but we will in January. He said, but I'll let you in. So I started with the social program at Venture House. They had a social program. I'm not sure if they still have one now. I guess they do. They do. And in the evening, I would come in to see the movies that they would show, have dinner with everybody. And I would come in occasionally from day to day during the day. At the time, I had a volunteer job at Victim Services, and I couldn't go in during the day most times because I worked for Victim Services from like 9 to 1 or sometimes 9 to 5. But I would go in sporadically during the day, and I found it a very cozy, warming, inviting place. It seemed like I could never fit in anywhere, and this was the first place where people accepted me and I could fit into. And I said, hey, I really like this place. And at the time, we were in the Y on the second floor on Parsons Boulevard. And the average number of members a day were about 16 members. That was a packed day. And, it was many less members than there are now.
Yes.
And, geez, I don't know what I want to say next. Oh, they didn't have they didn't even have a housing program back then. The housing program began in 1991, I think of January or February.
Yes.
And they just had an employment program, the transitional employment, the TEPs, is it called?
I think it might be.
Transitional employment, TEP.
Okay.
And I didn't go on a TEP right away. I got acclimated to the clubhouse and I was working a volunteer job. But in 1992, I said, hey, I really like this place. I don't want to work volunteer anymore. I want to come to Venture House daily, all day. And I would stay there from 8:30 in the morning to 8 at night. I would attend all day, doing all sorts of volunteer work. I was very active at the time. I wrote for the newsletter, The Venture Voice, which came out weekly then.
Yes.
And let me collect my thoughts. I worked. I stayed all day, and I volunteered, and then they had the employment unit. The what was the CID unit was the clerical unit.
Yes.
And they had the employment unit, the clerical unit, and and the kitchen unit. I
Yes,
didn't work much in the kitchen because I wasn't much interested at the time in working and cooking for the house. I thought it would be too overwhelming to cook for so many people. But I did work first. I worked when I came there in the clerical unit, and I loved it. There was a director named Deirdre Ballard who was the head of the clerical unit, and she retired a few years ago. She had been in the new building. I don't know if you knew her. I don't know how long you've been a member.
I've only been a member this year, only in
Oh, okay.
2021.
So you didn't
I'm
know
new.
her. She retired about 5, 6 years ago.
Yes.
She came to the new building. But anyway, going back to my earlier experiences at Venture House, it was just exciting. It was exciting to be a part of a clubhouse where members, didn't judge you because you way you looked or the way you walked or the way you talked, and everyone was so accepting and inviting. The members were just so loving and caring, and I made a lot of friends, and this is how I drew out of myself. I was sort of a loner and didn't have many friends at the time, other than my roommates in supportive living. And I made a lot of friends, and I began going out with them. We went out after the clubhouse closed, and we met, and I slept at their houses, and they came to my apartment. And I had many boyfriends through Venture House. And I really liked the place from day one. The program director at the time was Steve Dutiel, and the executive director was David Lehman. And they were just so caring and loving, and they just really cared about the members. They really cared, especially Steve Dutiel. He um he had something special about him. He really he just didn't he wasn't just there. He and David Lehman weren't just there to do like paperwork or meetings. I mean, David Lehman would literally let members while he was working come sit in his office on the couch and talk to
That's
him and
great.
crack with him while he was working. And Steve Dutiel, see, didn't have an office. It was too small. It was all on one floor in the Y. And he had a desk outside David Lehman's office, and he would let people just sit by, come by him while he was working or on the phone and talk to him. He was a real mensch, both of them. Excuse me.
Well,
And
it's
so,
wonderful. I haven't been there long, and I've only been on Zoom, but I find it very, very welcoming, and I enjoy seeing everyone. So
yeah,
how do,
I
how
still
do you
enjoy
like?
it to this day. I still enjoy it to this day. Now, the new building didn't come about until 1999. We
Yes.
opened in September of 1999. And when we opened at the new building, it was a big event. They had New York One there
Wow.
from that Time Warner come in and film and talk and interview members. I didn't get interviewed, but other members were, and it was a big event. It was a big opening, a big housing opening. The fact that we now had our own building, because we used to have to share a floor with other people in the Y. And sometimes some people in the Y weren't so accepting of the members, when the members would come in and have to be buzzed in. So we now had our own new building, and we literally our own house. And it was just as continuing as wonderful as it was in the Y, only better, only better.
And
Um,
and more people coming.
more and more people. And I'd like to add, the housing program began around February, January 1991. And I moved out of supportive living in November of 1992 and got my first Venture House apartment in Astoria, Queens. And I lived there 12 and a half years. But I had to move because it was a 4-story walk up, and I was on the 3rd floor, and my legs began to have trouble pulling the cart up for the laundry and for food. It was too much. I needed an elevated building. So I went to the then director of housing, Debbie Kaplan, who's no longer there. She left in about 2006, and asked her and told her, and she said, sure. And so she said, where would you like to live? I said, I'd love to live in Jamaica because it's near Venture House. And at that time, my clinic was across the street from Venture House,
Yes.
the Jamaica Community Clinic. But then they're now on the grounds of Creedmoor. But it's still in the area.
Yes.
I take Accessoride there, and I'm not currently taking accessorized. I'm having phone sessions with my psychiatrist and therapist because the clinic, like Venture House, is closed because of the
Yes,
pandemic.
yes.
But
So,
I
yeah,
wanted to be in Jamaica because I wanted to be near Venture House and near my clinic, especially Venture House. I wanted to be part of the community. I live in Jamaica, and I have a beautiful studio apartment. It's so large that when Fabian Perez, my caseworker, came to visit it, he said, "Is this a one bedroom?" He looked around. He said, "This is
that's
so
wonderful.
large." It's so large. And I am very, very fortunate because on top of having a large, beautiful apartment, my neighbors, all of them, are so kind and good. They're saying good morning, they hold the door for me, they talk to me. Some of them, talk to me personally. I have one neighbor who I have her phone number. She said, call me if you have an emergency. And I've never had a building in all my years, lived in an apartment building where there's such lovely neighbors.
Well, it's very
I
easy to be nice to you, Michelle. You were one of the first people, very warm and welcoming to me in Venture House, and you emanate that type of real love and enthusiasm and warmth that you talk about in Venture House. You have it, and so it's very easy for people to gravitate to you and to be nice to you, and
Oh, thank you,
be your
Judy.
friend.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. But I,
Yes,
I really picked up the Venture House energy. Like there was so
yes, you
much
did.
enthusiasm there. And at that time, in the old building in Parsons Boulevard, we don't have it now. We used to have something called a community meeting every once a week, every week, where we
Yes,
get together in the where the clerical office was, in the clerical room, and we would just talk about the week's events and how we were feeling about things that were going on, and the program director would inform us about certain issues about Medicaid and issues in the clubhouse. And it was a very free, loosely run meeting. I mean, people could talk out, they didn't really have to raise their hand, but they preferred it if you did. And Steve Jatiel and David Lehman were very liberal, kind of laid back leaders. Steve Jatiel was, like I said, the program director, and David Lehman was executive director. And excuse me, I have to take a drink.
oh, sure. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. Good cheers. Um, they were so wonderful to the members. I remember, one time when I wasn't feeling good, Steve Jatiel called Holliswood Hospital and he asked if they had a bed. And he not only drove me there, he waited with me, and they don't have an emergency room, but they have like a waiting room for you wait for the psychiatrist, the social worker.
I
And he
remember
waited, not only
Holliswood.
waited, I'm sorry.
No, I remember Holliswood Hospital. It was a great hospital. I'm sorry that they closed.
Oh, they closed.
Yeah, you were
I'm
lucky to have
sorry. It was such a great
a
hospital.
lot of hospitals in Queens have closed, and it's very very
Sad.
it's troubling because you know we it's good to have places to go.
Yeah. Well,
Especially
Steve Jatiel anyway took me to Holliswood Hospital. This was in around November of 1997. He not only drove me there, he took me into the waiting area where they wait for the psychiatrist to come in to interview and the social worker. He was even like supporting me when I first saw the psychiatrist come in. Yeah, he looked scary to me. I don't know. He kind of looked like Dracula. And I wasn't hallucinating or anything like that, but I told Steve that, and he says, I know he looks kind of, kind of.
Yeah, it can be very intimidating in hospital. I'm going to pause the recording because